Hello, I'm Luna, and you're welcome to From Chains to Cherish. I've always been passionate about mental health and gender based violence. Mental health because it's so personal to me, and GBV because of its direct and indirect impact in my life. I honestly do not believe that there is no one who's not affected by these two topics. And over the past few years, there has been an increase in numbers. I mean, we all know what is happening in South Africa, but when we come back here at home, Kenya, the prevalence is alarming. You look at mental health, one in four Kenyans has a mental health disorder, the main ones being anxiety, depression, alcoholic disorder. You look at GBV cases, SGBV cases. Last year alone, 2024, I read the stats and it was like 174 femicide cases. It was two new cases every 3 days, and that is so alarming. And also when it comes to depression, 6.5 thousand Kenyans out of 100,000 Kenyans has depression. And I was just wondering, what can I do to contribute to the change that we want to see? And I've been doing a lot of digital advocacy on my WhatsApp, talking about these topics with my friends, and the podcast idea came. It's taken a while because I was postponing a lot. I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it next week, and all that. But I just decided we have to do it because right now, honestly, I do think that we're in a crisis. Especially when I don't know if you guys watch the news, but there's a lot of underreporting going on, especially in men. Because we all know what the society thinks of men when it comes to them exposing their vulnerability. And I just want the main objective for this podcast to be a safe space for conversation. I hope that in future episodes, I can bring survivors to share their stories of hope and resilience. I just want to have this podcast be a movement of shamelessly talking about how we feel, talking about our pain, talking about what we have gone through, and to assure everyone that they are not alone. So, as I said, mental health is personal to me, and I'm just going to give a brief history. I mean, I'm not going to talk about it a lot. I'm still struggling, okay? So, I'm 25 years old, and I do believe that most of my mental health struggles stem from childhood. Growing up, there was a lot of verbal and emotional abuse, and it has really impacted me as a person right now. And I do hope it gets to the point where my feelings don't define me, but it's so hard. It was so hard because I got to my teenage years and I started self harming as early as 15 years old, but I'm not ready to talk about self harming yet. That is a painful subject. So maybe when I'm ready, I'll share it with you guys in the near episodes. It came from a point where I'm going through something. I just know that I used to get sad a lot. I was crying a lot. I was sad a lot. I was socially withdrawn. And then I'm down with my teenage years. And honestly, when does 19 is a teenager, right? I guess. So 19 years, I think that's the point where it became too much because I was feeling a lot and I didn't understand what was happening to me. Like, do you just ever go through something and you're like, what is happening? I used to ask myself a lot, why am I always so sad? Why am I always crying? And I did not have answers for that. So 2021 came. I went to Masinde Muliro University and I was staying with my dad. And how campus life is supposed to be fun and all that. So classes will be done. and I don't really want to hang out with anybody. So I will get done with classes and go back home because I was staying with my dad. And then I just lock myself in my room and I will literally just cry. It was happening a lot and I did not understand. Back then, I did not know what mental health was. And that's why I think it's so important to have this conversation to create more awareness, to keep talking about that until it becomes normalized. Because back then, I didn't have any information about what mental health was. Right now, I know what I used to experience back then were called episodes. I remember I went through this emotional breakdown and it was so horrible because sometimes I usually think about it and I end up crying. I'll talk about that later. So 2021, it became, I don't know, it was like explosive. So I would just like get out of school, go home, be in my room, cry, do the chores, repeat, repeat, repeat. And it was honestly, I was like in this fog of darkness and I really did not understand myself. I will just keep asking myself that same question. Why am I sad? Why am I crying? And I remember 2022 early, like I think it was January or February, I watched this documentary. I can't really remember the name. And it was like a relief, because finally I had a name for what I was going through. And that is where my obsession with mental health started. Because honestly, with that documentary, I was researching, reading articles, watching movies, watching Instagram reels, watching TikTok, people talking about their feelings. And I finally was like, oh, so I'm not alone. I'd say it was so validating because I did not have anybody to speak to. I was going through that pain and I did not have anyone that I was telling that I'm always crying, I'm always sad. I don't understand why that is happening to me. Why am I not normal? I didn't have anybody to talk about those feelings with. And it was like this huge relief that I felt after watching that documentary. I was like, oh, so I have mental health issues and anxiety. I do have anxiety. As I said, I do think I have depression because I have the strangest mood swings. My mood swings are a lot. And I'm an introvert, but sometimes I'm like, am I complex introvert? Is that is that even the right term? Because do there, like, we talk about extroverts and how some people just feel amazing when they're around people, but when I'm around people, I'm like, I feel lonely. I just feel pins and needles all over my body. And that's why whenever I'm in social situations, I even with family, I really do love being there with my sister. I'm like, she'll talk and I don't have to talk. So, wow. I mean, I'm still trying to understand myself, trying to figure myself out, but I'm so glad I realized that I was not alone in what I was going through. And that is where I just started being obsessed with mental health, really. And as I said, I was watching, reading, hearing people share their stories. And as time progresses, we see a lot of cases. There's been an increase in suicide cases, there's been an increase in GBV cases, a lot of underreporting. And I was just thinking of how can I contribute to the change that I want to see that people are fighting for right now. Because when it comes to mental health, there is a lot of stigma. You know, there's a lot of shame that it's a personal feeling that you just have to tell yourself to stop and it will stop. Because let me tell you something, it does not stop. when I get to an episode and I always know when it's coming because I don't know, do you just wake up and feel like today's not gonna be good? That is how I usually know when an episode is coming. I just wake up and I feel sad, and then mid morning comes and I'm crying and I'm crying, and the day is over and I'm still crying, and then I'm listening to sad music. But I'm so glad because I've I've come to learn better ways to cope because previously it used to be self harm. I mean, I stopped when I got to 19 years old. 2024 came and I started again. And I stopped because I remember I would wake up and I know I'm feeling a type some way, and I was just like, I need to do something to not feel this way because I realized all the things that I used to love. I used to love watching. I read a lot. Reading is one of my coping mechanisms, by the way. Like, it gets to the point where my brain is on overdrive. I just want to escape reality for a bit. So I go read romance books, I read investigative books, and when I'm done, I come back to reality and I'm like, I don't know, it's like some better way. I'm feeling a bit better. So I've been reading as a coping mechanism and also because I love to read. So, as I was saying, stigma is a lot out here, and the fact that it is associated with cultural beliefs and it is so embedded in cultural beliefs, by the way, and that is why there is inadequate care. That is why there is less numbers of people speaking up and seeking help. And I just think that we need to talk more. The more we have these conversations, we foster a safe environment for everyone to speak up, for everyone to for anyone who feels ready to speak up. Because again, as much as we talk about speaking up and seeking help, readiness is key. So when we foster a safe environment, then anyone who is struggling will feel ready to speak up. And that is just what I want to create here. I want to educate myself more. I want to educate others out there that it is totally fine to speak up and to just share stories and help one another heal. And I'm hoping as the podcast progresses that I'm going to be able to bring guests here from experts, advocates, survivors to share their stories. And you can also just give some feedback and tell us what you would want us to talk about in terms of mental health and gender-based violence. Because it's sensitive, it's complex, but one thing I know, and I just want everyone to know this: you are not a victim, you're a survivor. Thank you for tuning in. Please do subscribe, review, and tell us what topic you'll want us to explore. Follow us on all our socials at FCTC Podcast. Remember, you matter, you're not alone, and you're worth it. See you next.